Okay. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Experts Live Show, our official weekly series leading to Experts Live Emirates happening in November in Dubai. Each week, we're going to bring with us one of our amazing speakers. And today we have with us Eric. Before I hand it over to Eric, just make sure that you secure your spot and let's join us. So I'll hand it over to you, Eric. Welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me. And I'm really curious to join Experts Live Emirates. I've never been there, never been to Dubai. So it will be the first time for me, even though I've seen a lot of Experts Live events in my life so far. But really curious how it will be over there. So looking forward to it.
That's great. That's a great, Eric. Yeah, and actually, before we start, I would like to have maybe it's something personal, but I would share it with everyone. Actually, when I started planning for Experts Live, I had to discuss this internally with different team members, and then I shared the I would say the interest with Experts Live organizing, and then I met Eric in Seattle. Then he offered me a kind of support where he can give me a support beyond the need, to be honest, and that's happening, and that's where we are today. So thanks for you, Eric, for that.
You're very welcome.
Thank you. So what is you are planning to do for today?
Well, I think today we will talk a little bit about Azure Copilot, because in my session during Experts Live, we will dive deep into how Copilot works in Azure and what you can do with monitoring and how it might fit together with some other things like KQL. But the interesting thing is, what's the fundamentals? Like, how does it work and what is it intended to be? Because I still think a lot of people have so high expectations for Copilot. And it's always interesting or important to know what is happening in the background. Why is it working as it is working, or maybe not working as you expected? And maybe that's the thing we can do for today.
Interesting. Actually, I'll be your user today as well, because for me, to be honest, I'm not heavily dependent on the Azure Copilot. Maybe I tried at the beginning, it didn't work, so I left it where it was. I don't know what's going on right now. I know that Copilot is really evolving and it's going beyond the expectation. And that's actually bringing a question for me. What is the main difference between Azure Copilot and Microsoft 365 Copilot?
Obviously, it's not the name, because we all learned they just name everything Copilot. It's really the awareness of its environment. That's normally what you could say. Like if you have a look at M365 Copilot, M365 Copilot knows you as a user and your emails, your Teams chats, your data in SharePoint that you have access to. So it's really tailored towards you as a user in your environment. And so if you open Word and use it in there, then it only can access data that you have there. If we look into Azure, there is not really the thing about you as a user. It's your environment. It's your VMs. It's your databases, your network interfaces, your whatever you have out there. And that's the environment that Copilot needs to know to be able to help you. Plus, it needs some special knowledge about Azure, because it's nice that M365 Copilot knows how to, let's talk about, create a PowerPoint page. Okay, awesome. This functionality is not needed in Azure, but in Azure, I need to know things like Terraform or things like KQL, or I need to know what the difference between a virtual machine and a container is, which nobody cares about in Word. And that's pretty much the speciality. It's a Copilot. It's your assistant for the Azure environment, which has really good awareness of your Azure environment that you have set up. That's pretty much
interesting.
The starting point.
I see. I remember back days, one of our colleagues, a Microsoft MVP, he developed like a kind of RAG or a chatbot that will interact with your Azure APIs to help you with solving the problems. And that was before the era of Azure Copilot. At that time, it was, wow, that's super interesting. And I literally behind the scenes, I cloned his environment and start presenting this to the people locally here in the market, and they were very impressed with the solution. So I think this is something that we're gonna see today as well, right?
Yeah, more or less. And I think one of the things that you just said is you tested it out in the beginning, it wasn't that good, and so you stopped using it. That's, from my perspective, that's really the thing. And it's for all the Copilots. When you have tested Copilot in Word, when it was brand new, it was, sorry for the word, but it was shitty. It was not good. It never made what you wanted. You said, I want to create 3 pages. It texted you 7 pages, things like that. And that's pretty much also what we had in Azure. So we started in Azure. We tried Copilot, and everybody had super high expectations. Like, I could tell it, oh, create me this and that combined with this and that, and then convert my app into a modern web application that goes Azure native. And Copilot said like, well, I can read you the documentation. And we all were like, okay, I don't need you.
Thank you.
And then we forgot about it. And it's one of the things that I constantly also try to keep everybody reminded of is test things multiple times, because one of the things, and that's totally a side topic right now, but it reminds me of a conversation we had in Seattle, the Azure mobile app. There are so many people that have never used the mobile app, or they have used the mobile app once and never again, because in the early stages of the mobile app, it was like, why would I need a mobile app? So who's opening a mobile app to create something in Azure or to manage something in Azure? The best feature of the mobile app that nobody really knows about is that you can use it for PIM, privileged identity management, approving requests, sending requests, things like that. So if people would be aware of that, they would go there and use it. And I think it's pretty much the same with Copilot. If people would be more aware of what Copilot is capable of, they would be using it much more.
Interesting. You know what? Actually, in Experts Live, we do have a full track for Copilot. However, your session is not part of that, because at the beginning I said that you are a superhero when it comes to the infrastructure and the cloud and that part. So your session was literally on the track of the cloud and apps, which is that what it meant behind. But I can see that even you are touching the Copilot as well behind the scenes, which is interesting.
Yeah. But given the fact that Azure Copilot is only interested in infrastructure and apps, I think it's absolutely right in that track.
Nice. Okay.
So I would say let's get started, and maybe just let's have a look at Azure Copilot for the first time if you've never seen it before. So we know what's happening here, and then we can talk a little bit about what is it capable of and how does it work. So when you open your Azure portal and you have your environments here, you have this very prominent button up here, which is called Copilot. It's not just there. It also pops up now when you, for example, create new resources. Let's assume you want to create a new virtual machine, for example. We go in here. It's a little bit slow today. And you can see you have it here in the top line these days, where it says like, hey, help me to create a VM optimized for high availability. I need to right size my VM. How can I create a low cost VM? So typical things that Microsoft has seen. Or once again, you can remove that if you don't want to use Copilot. What happens if I say I want to create a VM for optimized high availability? Then it opens the Copilot side pane and starts it. But they more or less integrated it into more pages on the website so that you do not have to remember, oh, I need to click up here and ask my question. So it gives you kind of a recommendation. Oh, you're creating a VM? Have you ever thought about X, Y, Z? And then you can start from there.
I see. So looks like here it gives you a kind of instruction of what you can do, and which is very interesting. But on the other side, in case of I need to automate the function or to create it or to do the let's say the creation part itself or troubleshooting part itself, is this something that we are expecting as well, or it's something that it can do?
It can do a lot. So it can also do troubleshooting, but let's maybe start at the very beginning. And I like this demo or this screen pretty much because you as an experienced Azure person, or I as an experienced Azure person would look at this and say like, why? I don't need that. I know how a high available VM works, and I have my Terraform and my Bicep and my whatever code that you have, and I have a PowerShell how I can do that. I would never go into the portal and click it, and I would never talk to an AI about how to do it. But what we have to keep in mind is there's not just you and I out there. There are people that get started with Azure. There are people that are trying things for the first time. There are people that need to get used to it. So what about new joiners in the job? What about people that are straight from university, never have seen Azure because in university they were working on, I don't know, AWS or some other nasty stuff. So how would they get started? They don't have our experience of 10 years figuring around with Azure and going through all the ups and highs of the Azure portal. They opened this portal for the first time. They started this home screen and they're like, okay, I want to create a VM. And most likely they are struggling at this point already because why is a VM a resource? I want to create a VM. So, and that's where Copilot comes in at the very early stage to get started. The second thing where it's really getting interesting is a lot of people are using the standard assistants that we have here. So it's going in, and when we talk about this, then you have this availability options. Still, there are so many customers out there that don't know the difference between an availability set and an availability zone. So what decision do I do? And if I have a zone, now I have the zone options. Should I make Azure select the zone, or should I select the zone? I don't know. And what's the difference between zone 1, 2, and 3? And you see the problem. So for us, we know that. It's easy peasy. Zone, different data center, different energy, blah, blah, blah. My first VM is in zone 1. My second VM goes in zone 2. Easy peasy. If you've never done it, how would you know? And that's pretty much where Copilot starts to help you. So it goes in and says, like, if you want to do high availability, think about multi-zonal, think about scale sets, IP addresses, load balancing, app gateways. And then you can start kind of digging down and say, like, okay, if I want to do multi-zonal, what are the options in here? I ended it for whatever reason. It crashed here. But now I could say, like, okay, what are availability zones? And then I can start doing that. For sure, I could open learn.microsoft.com and read through all of this. But here I have it like in the moment when I try to go through the assistant, I'm like, okay, availability zone, what is that? Why should I choose this over this? I can have this conversation with Copilot. And that's bringing up a big problem of Copilots out there, all of them, waiting time. People are so impatient. Nobody wants to wait for an answer. So asking the question, having to wait for it is really a problem for many of them. And now you got the information. So what are availability zones and so on. Okay, so that's pretty much the starting point. It's really about, let's call it design. Like, how do I design my environment? Where do I get started? And you can go ahead and ask kind of difficult questions. How do I create a container-based web app in Azure? In Azure. So, and it will help you with that. In order to do that, it doesn't need to know the back knowledge of Azure. So what are the available services? What's the documentation? How can I do this? So, and you can see here, it gives us a bunch of information, containerized React web app with Python API and MongoDB. That's a workload that could work. And then it even goes that far that I could say view workload. And it brings me to the right GitHub repository where the whole configuration is in, where I could go into the README and figure out how everything works here. So that's the knowledge that's in there. And if you have never done it before, that's your starting point to learn. Obviously, it's not doing the magic for you. So you also need to learn it.
It's pretty interesting as well. I can see that when it comes to, let's say, such offering, which is just being offered right now, for me, I wasn't really going to that direction. Let's say if my customer is looking for app services, I will directly go with the basic functions. But now give a kind of really combination integration, MongoDB. I will never think about having MongoDB in the picture. And GitHub is a very great source for sure.
Yeah, and obviously, the more specialized your request is, the more details you give. Like, what do you really want to achieve? How do you have some limitations? Like, I could have said, I have written a web app in Python or whatever. What's the best way to run it on Azure? And it would help me with that too. So, and that's how you can go through it. And then you can see it's always also suggesting you, how do I deploy a containerized web app using Azure Container Apps, for example. And it will help you after a quick time of thinking to actually achieve that. And it goes that far that at some point you might even ask it to create you the code for it. So here it tells you, okay, that's how you do this. Create a container app, and it goes through the portal because we're talking about the portal. And now I can say like, okay, could I do this with PowerShell? Because I don't want to click the portal.
Yeah, and actually, I was coming to that section, which is CLI and PowerShell will be very quick, especially gonna provide me with the command itself, so I can just inject it on the portal.
Absolutely, and that's pretty much the thing. So you get started on the low hanging fruit, and I will tell you a little bit about the context in a second, and then you can kind of jiggle your way through where you need to go. I could also have asked CLI. I could also have asked for Terraform. There are providers in the backend that pretty much help with everything that you can imagine, more or less. And now here we go. We get a PowerShell script that actually tells us, okay, we need to define the variables, we need to create the resource, new AZ container app, and so on and so forth. And that's a starting point. Once again, obviously, that's not everything you need because you might need your container storage and so on. But it's a good starting point, and you have a code that you can get started with. And now it's like, okay, PowerShell script, pretty nice. What about Terraform? So, and while this is working, let's talk a little bit about how this works in the backend. I will just share my screen here, or just share my presentation. So if we have, that's Architektur is architecture. Sorry for the German title, but it shouldn't matter. What we've been working with is the Copilot front end. That's what we've seen. So we have the chat UX, that's the user interface, that's where we were typing and where it gives us back. And actually the Copilot front end has two main things. The one thing are adaptive cards. So it's able to integrate stuff into the chat interface. So you can have the cards that really, for example, visualize things, or that give you some click-through activities and things like that. And the other thing, and that's the super, super important piece, is the context and action services. Because Copilot actually knows where you are. So it makes a difference if you are on the homepage of the Azure portal and you ask about a VM, or if you are on the page of the VM. And the typical issue that people have is they are here. So once again, Terraform created, all good. Now we have the Terraform code. Let's not dig into that much more. But let's assume we are here and I have 2 VMs running my website. What's the thing that pops to your mind if your website is not running? You got a call from your customer, oh, my website is down. So what do? You might go in here and you say, is my VM up and running? Because in your head, you absolutely know what you're talking about. That's this VM that needs to be up and running because I'm looking for my website. So we are here. So what it does, it understood, okay, we need to talk about VMs and we need to figure out if it's running. So it showed for a quick second, I'm looking into Azure Resource Graph because Resource Graph helps us to figure that out. And it says like, okay, resources where virtual machines, where the power state is running. Okay, that's a valid thing. Right now in my environment, there are no virtual machines because I run everything on platform services, but technically it did the right thing. It created a resource graph query and went for it. But that's not what I was thinking about. I was thinking about is this particular VM running, but I didn't ask it because I need to be more specific, and I don't know that I need to be more specific. So there's a huge difference if I might not go into a VM, but let's go, for example, in here. There are some web components. So if I'm in here and I go to my app service plan, and now I ask Copilot, is my app service plan healthy? Now it should, and I say it should because Copilot is sometimes a little bit buggy. It should know the context that I'm in because I'm in this service plan right now. And you can see fetching request for ASP EMLA DE. So that's what it showed quickly. Here we can see it. So it actually knows where we are. And that's this context and action services because it now knows I navigated to this page. So actually when I'm talking to it, I want to talk about that particular service that I opened. The other way around, if you want to know more because you would like to know if all your app service plans are healthy, don't go into a particular service plan and ask the question, are my service plans healthy? Because it will only dig into that one because it's aware.
But it's really interesting, to be honest. I wasn't really aware about that function. It's super interesting because usually I have to really write the full context, like my app service in this location. And sometimes I'm getting the resource ID. So I'm very specific of what I'm asking for, but yeah, I wasn't aware about that. That's really interesting.
And that's I think that's an important point. The nasty thing is it wasn't able to get the health status. Okay, let's forget about that. But we've seen it was trying to work on the right thing, and that's what I've seen with a lot of customers. They are in a particular VM, and they start asking questions about another VM, and Copilot is not able to handle that because it goes into your context. You're in this context of the VM, so it cannot break out of this. So you would need to go back to the VMs blade, for example, or back into the homes blade or something like that. Otherwise, it's really difficult for it. But that's this context and action services or service that I've just shown to you. And then you have some extensions, and extensions is like the functionality that we have on top of that. That's what we see. That's what we interact with. In the back end, there are some handlers. There's a forms handler, command handler, shell handler, because you need to be able to handle whatever is put in there. Those are these extensions that we give there. There is this chat interface for sure. There's the code block. That's what always pops up when you do Terraform, PowerShell, or whatever. And there's even a way to have some forms like click buttons and things like that. And then what's really happening in the background is there's an orchestration layer. And this orchestration layer takes your not so well written prompts and tries to bring it into the context that we're talking about. And therefore they have the grounding. The grounding actually does what it says, like it grounds your prompt and says, okay, he asked it on this page. He asked it about this VM. He mentioned the VM name in his prompt. Whatever it is. And it tries to figure out what you're talking about. Is it really, I don't know, are you talking about health state? Then maybe we need to look into monitoring data. Or are you talking about a deployment? So I would rather look into documentation or GitHub or something like that. Or are you asking me to create some PowerShell code? So I most likely need a handler that's able to talk about PowerShell code. And then you have a little bit of prompt and response filtering. Obviously, we don't want it to be misused. And if you say, could you create me a Word document, then Azure Copilot needs to tell you, nope, I can't, because that's not mine. And then you have plugins. And the plugins are actually the knowledge. Like in your example of earlier, this could be the RAG approach, but they have like different, or the multiple different things that they look into, like Docs and Learn. You have KQL query support. It's every time you run Azure Resource Graph, it needs to create a KQL query for you. It has a cost adapter that helps you to figure out things about your cost because it can look into the cost dashboard, and so on and so on. And that's really what's happening in the background. That's the high-level overview. We can dig one step deeper if you want to.
Yeah. So while you are trying to go deeper into that level, just from the perspective of that knowledge, I can see that the engine itself does have integration with docs, learn, KQL, and opcost, and X and Y and Z. I know that this is the offering from Microsoft, so it come out of the box. You don't have you cannot really refer to external resources. But when it comes to the other engines like public ChatGPT or whatever it is, it go beyond the well-known materials or well-known documentation. And let's say it's gonna look at document that is not available in Microsoft Docs, and it look at, let's say, your blog. You have written a very well-structured blog about KQL. It's not available in Microsoft, but it is there. So as of today, we don't have that capability there, right? It's only one source.
Yeah, it's very limited. So it also uses the general models, but it's really scoped to the domain-specific plugins and to answer from that knowledge hub, more or less. Huh?
Yeah.
So that's where we're in. So, and now we can have a look at how the flow is going. Because originally we are a user in the Azure portal. So in my Azure portal, there is this shell context data. So Azure portal knows where I am, because otherwise it couldn't show me the right page. That's what the context and action services in Copilot use. They have a look, okay, where are we? What are we actually doing here? This one is then taken, the context plus the question that you typed in, and put into the orchestration layer. This orchestration layer then decides, based on what we've written, okay, we need to call a plugin. He's asking a knowledge question. He's asking a KQL question. He's asking about cost for particular VM, whatever. So that calls actually the plugin. And then the plugin, depending on what we're doing, is using some external data or backend data, like it's going into Azure Graph or it's going into Custo to actually form a KQL query or things like that. And it's actually also accessing data, by the way, always in your user context. So it's not capable of seeing things you don't have access to. If there's a subscription you are not, you don't have permissions to, you can't see the data. That's crystal clear.
The very well-known question, which is, I'm pretty sure that you're gonna get this question a lot in Experts Live UAE, and even maybe you are getting in Germany as well, is privacy and my data and access to strengths, access to keys, because my account does have access to. So what about the engine?
Yeah. So it's all in your user query, and it, as you can see, the AI infrastructure, the GPT model, etc., is not the one that's calling your resource graph. It's this plugin, and that's why it has this multi-layer approach. That it's not really ChatGPT that's going and asking your data and then gets it back and then uses it for secret training or whatever. It's this plugin store that is, or the plugin in the plugin store that's able to kind of use the backend data, pull it back, and then from there there is a response created. So that's what's going up, and then from here we get a rich visual, or we ask for confirmation, because you could even ask Copilot to shut down a VM if you want to. If it has figured that out, it would ask you, like, you really want to do that? You could say yes, and then it actually executes it for you.
I hope it's going to shut down the right VM.
Yeah, that would be good to check that up front.
Yeah.
So, and then in your portal view, for example, it could also direct you to the right data. It could run the KQL query for you, or it opens the right pane because you said, I want to know more about this VM. So it brings you in the right portal view to see the right data that you're looking for. So that's actually how it works in the backend. And that's what's happening every time. So no matter what you type in here, it always goes through that path. It figures out what's your intention. Are you looking for creation, deletion, cost, whatever, then goes into the plugin, gets the data back, and it's pretty much highlighted up here. And that's all low-hanging fruits, or that's like, oh, how can I create a VM? How can I do this? How can I do that? The interesting thing is you can ask a lot more questions, and I will most likely start a new chat here. You can ask a lot more questions about the environment itself. Because you could also say, like, hey, list my current budgets, or what am I spending the most on in Azure? So I don't even need to go to the cost and billing blade. I could ask Copilot, like, what am I spending the most, or which VM is costing me the most, or whatever it is. You can see it said we're going for an Azure Resource Graph query. So pretty much everything is resource graph in the backend, because that's the only thing that we can do on a performant way if you have large environments. And that's also an important thing. Copilot gives you limited answers. If you, for example, say, give me a list of my VMs or give me a list of my IP addresses. Okay. I love Copilot. That's great for a demo.
It went somewhere else.
It went somewhere. It went into the let's talk about documentation piece.
I see.
But yeah, what it actually does is it gives you a short list, like 5 items. If you have hundreds of VMs, you will not get this into the chat, because that would not make sense.
And that's a valid point, to be honest. Like there is limit of API call as well behind the scenes. And I literally remember back days, I got a request for one of a very big entity here in Emirates, and they are very heavy Azure consumer. So behind the scenes, they do have more around 50 subscription. Every subscription does consume around 500,000. So it's literally big entity. And he was asking me to do a kind of dashboard where I can correlate all the costing in one place and calling this in like a normal interactive interface. So for sure, this will not come out of the box, but yeah, and the solution for that was Lighthouse, just because you're getting the multiple limits combined together with Azure subscription. Yeah, but for such a Copilot, again, as you highlighted, it does have its own limit as well. Just related to the limit, on the normal Copilot, we do have only maximum, I think, 25 questions. I don't remember if it's still there or not, but is it here as well?
Yeah, there's also also limitation.
I see. Interesting.
Because the main issue is that at some point it kind of loses track. So the interesting thing is, what I just did, I went ahead and changed my context. I went into my environment. The main thing is, in this subscription, there's nothing in there, so there's no cost accumulated.
I see.
It was a bit of a mean question. But as you've seen, it started creating me the KQL query for this. Order properties amount, descending, and so on. So I could easily see this now. And that's kind of my main learning. Changing context gives better answers. If you ask such a generic question in the home screen, you normally are misleaded, because it's normally going to documentation or something. If you're on the right blade, then it gets better and better and better. And that's a little bit of a thing that you need to figure out at some point. Is really what do I try to achieve? Am I in the right area to actually figure that out? And if you start a new session here, it actually also brought up like, okay, how do you configure a contact profile in Orbital? Earlier it said, how can I fix my VM issues? Things like that. And one of the things, and that's something that I will keep for my Experts Live Emirates session, is it can really help you troubleshoot. It can really go down into performance issues on SQL databases, for example, and help you to solve those issues and look into the monitoring data and understand why things are working badly and so on. But that needs a little bit more context and a little bit more time.
I see.
There's one tiny little thing that we should look at for Copilot, and that's the settings. Because the one question is, what about my privacy? What about my data? What about my things? The other thing is, why is this freaking button up there? How can I get rid of it? It's also a lot of customers that I have asking that. So the actual thing is, if we go into, now I need to figure out where it is because I zoomed in that much. It's not in here. Damn it, where was it? It should be here. Directories and subscriptions. There is a settings area where you can say how Copilot works. Wait a second, maybe I'm totally wrong. I should here, Copilot in Azure Admin Center. There it is. And you can see the Copilot Admin Center is massive. It has so many options. You're totally overwhelmed by all the options that you have. It has access management. That's it. And access management gives you two main options. Number one is what is, by the way, the default for everyone right now, available to all users. So everybody out there everybody who's going to portal.azure.com and is able to log in there will have access to Copilot. Copilot will only answer questions for the scope that the user has access to, but everybody will see this button, can use this button, and so on. If you're not happy with that, because one of the things, or one of the conversations I had about this was, we give people dedicated access to start VMs for the test lab. That's the only thing they should be able to do. They should not talk with Copilot about how fancy containers would be. They go there, start, done. So what we would do is you turn off the available for all. Then you freak out for a second because it goes blank. And then you go to manage access. And manage access brings you to the access control. And then you can pretty easy assign roles. And there is a role that's called Copilot in Azure User. And you assign that role to a group, to a user, to whatever you want to have. And then only those users would be able to use Copilot. And that's pretty much the only thing that you can manage when it comes to Azure Copilot.
Yeah. Interesting.
But it's one of the I think the most asked questions, like how can I turn it off and how can I give only certain people access to it? Yep, that's here, Copilot in Azure Admin Center.
Interesting.
And
but
nobody knows if more is coming to it or not. We don't know. We will see.
But also the most important point, as you highlighted at the beginning, your Copilot give you access to what you see, not everyone else what they see.
Absolutely. So it's only your user's context. So if you have access to one subscription with one VM, that's what you can talk about. And if you, for example, and that's one of the concerns in bigger companies, the cost data. I don't want people to know the cost of my environments because that's a company secret, whatever. If you don't have a role that's able to see cost, then also Copilot will not answer you anything about cost. So,
interesting.
Yeah. It sticks to the rules. And I think that's the starting point. So you need to know Copilot knows about your context, and you need to know Copilot has a lot of plugins in the back end that can help you create certain code and so on. And still, and that's part of my talk in November, there are things that you would expect it to do and it's not capable of, because there are other implementations and other Copilots out there that are intended for more, let's call it more specific or more domain-specific activities than the general Azure Copilot is. And one of those is maybe potentially KQL. There's a better and even better way to do KQL than Azure Copilot, but let's talk about that in Dubai.
Yeah, I'd say that was really helpful session. I can see lots of interesting points. As I mentioned, for myself, even I've not been using Copilot a lot, but I think this is where I need to get my hand dirty. And yeah, just behind the scenes, when it comes to your session in Experts Live, just give a quick brief about what's going to happen. And so just give the people insights of your plan for the session itself.
Okay, the plan, my plan for the session is to have a lot of fun. I will pretty much guide you through, number one is, how does Copilot work again? Just to remind you, that's pretty much what we're talking about today. But then we go into the nitty-gritty details of how to combine it with monitoring and what can we do in monitoring with it. And then, because like if we want to dig deep into monitoring, how does KQL fit into place and how do we get into proper KQL queries? Might be for Azure Resource Graph KQL queries, but also real KQL queries for log analytics and really starting to analyze all the data that Azure Monitor is gathering for you. How do you dig into this data? Because I know a lot of people have really struggled to get started with KQL for one or the other reason. But actually, there are some really nice helpers out there that are called AI that can go into that. And the session is called, Let Me Tell You a Joke. And I will tell you a joke in my session. And you need to sit the whole session to get the point at the end. So
interesting.
That's the fun thing about the session.
The naming. I like it. It's very attractive. Great. Yeah, so I think we reached out to the end of the session, and I was really happy to have you today, and for sure looking forward for seeing you in Dubai as well. That will be where we're gonna meet and do have lots of fun. On the other side, I'm pretty sure that people will be interested in understanding more about Copilot, where they're gonna join your session. And again, thanks for your time, Eric.
Thanks for having me, and see you everyone in Dubai.
Thank you. Have a good day.